Well, good morning, good day, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are on the planet. This is John Dupuy. I'm John Dupuy with Javi Otero, and this is Spiritual Technologies 2.0, and we have another incredible guest, Dr. Beverly Rubik, who is one of the leading scientists in the field of subtle energies. And I'm going to read a short bio here just to give you an understanding of who we're talking with here. So, get yourself ready, because this is going to be really interesting. And she also has, Beverly, you also have a PowerPoint presentation to present. And after an initial kind of just talking a little, let you know about yourself, we can roll into that. Beverly Rubik earned a BS in chemistry at Illinois Institute of Technology in 1972 and a PhD in biophysics at the University of California, Berkeley in 1979. She is internationally renowned for her pioneering work in frontier science and medicine. She's president and founder of the Institute for Frontier Science, a nonprofit laboratory in the San Francisco Bay Area, where she conducts basic science and clinical research. Her main areas of interest and research are on the human biofield, mind-body medicine, the interrelationship of consciousness and the physical world, and frontier research on water. She has published over 100 papers and 2 books and taught at various state and private universities for over 30 years. She serves on the editorial boards of the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine, Integrative Medicine Insights, and the Journal of Vortex Science and Technology. Wow, you have been busy. So, Beverly, can you just let us know how you began this journey and anything that you'd like to share about that?
Absolutely. Well, it all started when I was a little girl, and I could see energies around people that I knew, and it gave me information about them. I do remember one distinct thing when I was about 3 years old, and my mother had a friend who was visiting and wanted me to sit in her lap, but I cried hard. I would not sit in this woman's lap. Her energy field looked chaotic to me, and unfortunately, she had a mental breakdown a short time later. And so it was a natural for me to want to pursue this area. And also, when I was 9 years old, I wanted already to become a scientist. In fact, I was nicknamed the Sisyphist by my friends, physicists. They joked about it. And I wrote away to the Women in Physics Society in America because I had no role models in my family for this. But I found out that women, indeed, a small number, were going into physics. And I just simply kept my eye on the ball and continued my education in that direction. And studied rather conventional things at University of California because there really wasn't a field. There was no mind-body science. There was no energy medicine. Those things were in the future. But I knew that I wanted to study something about the energy field of the human being. And I simply went through the motions. I've finished my doctorate in quite a different field, looking at what I would call microbial consciousness, the behavior of bacteria in liquid suspension and how they swam around and remained individuals. It was the closest thing I could find to an interest in consciousness. And then when I graduated, I decided I'm done with conventional science. I really have very frontier questions to pose and didn't really find an appropriate place in academia, but took a teaching position. But during my last days in graduate school, I had some serious knee pain, and I was scheduled for exploratory surgery because there was no medical imaging in those days, unfortunately. And then somebody rather jokingly said to me, "Why don't you see a healer to see if you can remedy this?" And I said, "Well, who's that?" And they said, "Well, Dr. Olga Worrell is coming to town." She was an older woman, ran a prayer circle at a church in Baltimore. And so I went to see her, and she placed her hands on my knees and entered into a prayerful trance state. And I felt an amazing sensation of tingling and heat. And I stood up afterwards, and I was able to bend my knees and avoid the surgery that I was scheduled for. And after that, I decided I'd like to study this. There's something here. It's not just a placebo effect. It lasted. And so that launched my whole inquiry into subtle energies and energy healing.
Wow, that's you know, I was reading your bio, and your academic and professional bona fides are pretty overwhelming. And the first thing you start talking about is this capacity you had as a young child. So I think that's really interesting how this was, you know, so many of these powerful stories have these initiatory events, or something happens in childhood and you followed it through, I don't know, through your whole life. So you sounds like you've really been kind of on focus the whole time. You were called early and you stayed with the vocation.
Well, and there were obstacles along the way. I mean, we're talking the 1970s. There really, things like therapeutic touch were just getting started. Reiki was not well known. These things were not well known even in California. And I had tremendous difficulties. For example, I got a grant to study spiritual healing at a major university in California. And then, and they signed off on it. I went through the official channels to write this grant and submit it. Then the university administrators called me in one day and they said, yes, the grant was approved, but I'm sorry to tell you, we can't have you do this here. And I was flabbergasted. They signed the paperwork, but they said, we'll use your money for good use. Thank you very much. This was my first academic job. I was flabbergasted that they would take my money, the money that I had gotten with this grant, and use it for another purpose. And then in 6 months, I was dismissed from my position. They were frightened of this phenomena, and I think they saw it as a mix of science and religion somehow, when I was merely asking the question, when a spiritual healer puts her hands around or nearby cell cultures, would growth be enhanced? It was a straightforward question, and I actually had preliminary data that I did on the back bench on weekends at University of California at Berkeley during my graduate school days. But that didn't matter. I was out and dismissed. And then the letters of recommendation coming from San Francisco, you can't imagine. It said, I'm unconventional. Where in the United States can you go when you have letters that say you're unconventional coming from San Francisco? So that was my first academic position, and I was blackballed. But I managed to persevere and find another footing and move onward. And so my career was not easy. I was a bit of a trailblazer, but things are getting much better nowadays. There's a lot of interest in these topics. I even held a grant from the National Institutes of Health some 25 years later to study spiritual healing and to do some of the things on a very large scale that I wasn't able to do earlier. But I found it necessary to get out of the academia, to found my own laboratory. And I did that, and it's 20 years old today. So.
Well, congratulations. You know, I just want to share, I was also initiated up to the master level in Reiki, whatever that means. And I've had an experience of laying hands on people and having really remarkable things happen. And I have no idea what's going on. I do get in a very prayerful kind of just focused meditative state, and just crazy thing. I mean, just remarkable. Cysts have disappeared. I've used it a lot with working with people coming off drugs and heroin and detoxing and calm and sleep. Things that I can't account for, and I don't even know what's going on. So maybe today I'll be a little more enlightened about what's actually happening. So I really understand what you're saying. To me, it's not woo. It's a little woo. It's a little mysterious, quite frankly. But I've actually seen the effects of it in my own work, and actually it's been done on me at times when I was extremely depressed, and I just had great shifts in energy after through that kind of work. So just to let you know, it's not completely objective here. I'm part of this story and engaged.
Yes, and so many people are. So many people learn Reiki, learn therapeutic touch, healing touch. There are so many modalities today. It's incredible. So the field has really blossomed, even though we don't fully understand what's going on when an energy healer or a spiritual healer lays hands on or nearby a person, or even prays, does distant healing. There are remarkable things that happen, and I have heard much of this, and I've explored it too in laboratory controlled experiments. And we have seen effects when nothing should happen according to conventional science, but it does. So there's a tremendous, I would say, burst of interest, and the whole culture has moved in this direction.
Yeah, we were talking to Judith Pennington from Mind Mirror the other day, and she was showing us the brainwave patterns of a healer engaged in this, and there was like really strong gamma waves up top. And I don't know if you've looked at that, but it was very interesting. And then they showed the patterns of the person that was being healed. So there's really significant things that could be seen, at least on a neurological level, when people are in this healing state. So,
Yes, I'm not surprised at that, because one of the things we found with energy healers is that after the act of healing, they have very high scores in what we would call psycho-spiritual wellness or connection to the divine. In fact, that was one of the most significant findings of my NIH study, was not just about bacterial healing or patient healing, but statistically, it was a p-value of 0.0001. It was an outstanding value of these peak experiences that healers feel. And that's one reason they love to do it. They experience enormously powerful psychological, emotional states, connection to the divine, and they themselves feel better. They also get well in the act of helping others.
brilliant, beautiful. Did you want to, at this point, start with the PowerPoint? And I'm sure that will be a great focus and guide, and then we can have some follow-up discussion after that.
So I prepared this short overview just for you folks. And I want to begin with just some studies that we did on the pyramid. Now, that's probably the most ancient spiritual technology that we know of. The Egyptian pyramid, the Cheops pyramid, this amazing monolithic structure that survived thousands of years. I don't think we know exactly how old it is, but I've worked with small constructed pyramids made of wood, 2 to 4 feet in diameter. And actually, you know, I certainly didn't invent this, but my significant other, Harry Jabs, had sciatica once, and he had the idea, instead of going to a chiropractor or other practitioner, that if he slept under a pyramid, it would help him. And he built himself a 4-foot pyramid and oriented to magnetic north. So he had it in such a way that it could be turned and oriented so that the face was parallel with magnetic north, and slept under it and found that it really helped his pain. And then began to do, help others around him when friends had problems or their pets. There was a fellow whose dog was dying, and he said, well, let's try the pyramid. And the other thing about this pyramid shown here is that in the 5-point, which is a very special point related to the golden ratio, one can hang, in this case, written cards with one's intents or wishes or what one would like to happen at that point, and they seem to come true faster. And I noticed, we've slept under a pyramid for some years, that everyone that we know, including ourselves, has heightened incredible dreams. It really stimulates your dream life, so much so that, well, it's sort of like the movie Avatar, where you have such an intense experience that goes beyond your regular daytime life. It's like a second life with adventures that go on and on. So I highly recommend this. We also did some experiments with it. Here I show a plant seed germination experiment. We were interested in whether the pyramid would help facilitate the germination and growth of seeds. So we set up this 4-foot pyramid, again, oriented toward magnetic north in the laboratory with light controls. There were 12 plants under the pyramid. These were Kentucky wonder beans placed in vermiculite, a non-nutritive substrate, all watered exactly the same in terms of the volume of water per day. And we actually had 4 treatment conditions. There was a control with no pyramid and no healers. There was another group, 6 plants with healer treatment alone. Then we had a group with just the pyramid, and the pyramid plus the healer treatment. So the healer treatment was done before the plants went under the pyramid or the control group. So we were comparing now 6 plants in each condition. and follow them over time. And I'll just show you an example here. One of these shows intent on the right-hand side and no intent on the left. And you can see with no pyramid, the plants look rather small, and leaves aren't as large as with the pyramid. And at this stage, we didn't see a clear distinction between intent or no intent from the healers. But as we moved along, we did. So on day 18, we see here, you have to go by the rulers because without a pyramid, the leaf size was less than 4 centimeters long. But with the pyramid, we saw many leaves at 5 centimeters. Already we're starting to see a change. And just to move it forward, in the net result in the end, we dried the plants and measured dry weight, which is a very well-accepted figure for biomass, the mass of the plant, the group. And what we found was, compared to controls, the seeds that were germinated and nurtured under the pyramid grew 19% more biomass. With the healer intent alone, we found about 22.7%. And the pyramid with healer intent was larger. It was over 31% more biomass, which is really significant. And we also looked at the root mass, which it was also more extensive, the roots, even though it was only supported by vermiculite without any nutrition. It's not soil. So it seems to us that the use of the pyramid amplified healer intent and really stimulated plant growth. Although these seeds all started the same and there was no added nutrition, whatever nutrition was in the seed, and that's what the plant became. Nonetheless, we saw rather robust differences. So we think the pyramid, and also from the healing anecdotal testimonials, the pyramid amplifies intention. It restores the system to its intended purpose. It amplifies and optimizes living things. And the neighbor's dog that was on its last leg, the pyramid was placed on the floor, not even over the dog's bed. And the dog crawled over and slept and lived under the pyramid. Animals seem to know this. And then they moved the dog's bed there. And the dog survived and thrived to live another 2 years due to the pyramid. I also noticed it with fish. I have 5 aquariums, and we had some fish that were sick, and I put a 2-foot pyramid oriented toward magnetic north over the fish tank. Of course, in this case, there can be no placebo effect. The fish never saw the pyramid, only I did. And of course, I did have the intent to help the fish. And sure enough, the fish survived and thrived and lived longer than their life expectancy from the books. So I'm excited about pyramids. There's definitely something there. And it's such a simple thing one can make with wood or other materials. The material doesn't seem to matter. The exact geometry is best if you use the golden ratio, as is found in the ancient Egyptian pyramid, and orienting toward magnetic north, as is also found in Egypt, seems to be important. You can actually turn the pyramid on and off like a water faucet. If it's unoriented toward magnetic north, you don't get an effect. And once it's oriented, you get these powerful effects.
So what, Beverly, what do you think is going on here with the pyramids? It's focusing energy somehow?
I think it's a lens for subtle energies, and an amplifier of our intention, our positive intention to make, to heal, to optimize life. It's amazing. I mean, you know, there's a lot of lore about pyramids, and I don't know that all of it's true about sharpening razor blades and keeping bananas from rotting. But for sure, when tested, a plant dry weight biomass is a very well accepted measure. If something is growing more robust and you dry it and weigh it with a sensitive balance, there's no question. 31% is a very robust effect. Something is going on. And as a result, I've been sleeping under a pyramid ever since then, and just love my dream life and the quality of my sleep, and all those little aches and pains just tend to melt away. So I highly recommend it. It's something we can all do. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is really more closely connected to my life's work, and that is about the biofield, measuring the light of life. what are called biophotons, the light, the natural light that's coming out of living things. Now, light in itself has been a symbol and manifestation of the divine. We have many works of art and religious and otherwise that show halos around saints and other religious figures. And it's intimately connected with living organisms, this light. The biofield, which I coined the word, is related to, I believe, the life force, that there is a life force within living things, which consists of an energy field within and around it that I believe is, and I've hypothesized and written in my scientific papers, intimately involved in the regulation of living processes, the biochemistry, the physiology, the development of an organism from a fertilized egg onward to healing when it's broken, and even biocommunication between organisms. And there's experiments that substantiate all of these things. I'm not going to discuss all of them today, but just give you some highlights. So the biophotons are really visible light, even though they're at a very, very weak emission, ultra weak, really. We're talking about counting single photons coming out of the human body from the energy centers, the chakras, up the midline, as well as the hands, the fingers, and the palms of the hand. And there's a literature that shows that this light is being emitted by all living organisms. It was discovered over 100 years ago by a scientist named Gurvich, who noticed that when he had 2 onions in a paper bag, they seemed to enhance one another's growth. 1 onion alone didn't. And then he went on to do experiments to show it wasn't chemical, it was light. They stimulated one another by emitting light and communicating. And they tended to grow in a paper bag or separated by glass. So we've known this for a long time, yet it's not been researched much in by conventional science that largely thinks that the light coming out of living things is just some photoluminescence, some junk energy, but it has biocommunication and meanings and apparent purposes because it shows up during healing and meditation. So when a person intends to heal or emit energy, we measure the light emission from the hands, from the palm of the hand, or from what we would call the sword fingers, the index finger and the third finger, as used in Qigong, goes up from a factor of hundreds to thousands. And meditation increases light emission from the crown of the head and the palm of the hand too, by the same large factor. So something's going on here. This is not junk light. This is meaningful radiation, and it contains information and is communicating between organisms as well, as shown in other studies. So I asked some questions in a research study. Can we measure a change in this emission from the hands of practitioners before and after they do energy therapy? And can we measure them, biophotons from patients before and after energy therapy? And can we measure the biophotons during spiritual energy healing? So for this purpose, we created a biophoton chamber. It's really a large closet, 4 by 4 by 8 feet, made of plywood. And the interior is painted black. And here you see some of the controls on the outside of the box. Here's the inside of the box. We have 3 stools for 2 subjects who are going to interact and myself as experimenter so that I can move the probe around, the photomultiplier tube, which is on this, what has been repurposed, what was a dental lamp, and the lamp has been removed, but the dental lamp has infinite ways to move it. So it's a very good thing to use in the dark to move the detector around and place it on the bodies of my healers and healees and count these photons being emitted during energy healing. So I can't really show you the experiment at work, but here's a mock-up of what we do in the dark. This is Harry, my significant other. He has positioned the detector, which is this black photomultiplier tube, near his third eye, and he actually would move it even closer during making a measurement. So I'm inside the box with 2 persons also wearing black so that we don't scatter light, and measuring the light of life before, during, and after energy healing. And just to make a long story short, here's a session with one particular healer, one of our stars, and this is the raw data. So there's a bit of noise because we're really looking at a quantum effect. we start out at a baseline, and then I put the detector on the palms of the hand of the healer, first the right palm for 2 minutes, then we wait 2 minutes, and then we move to the left palm, and then we do another baseline, and then to the patient's right and left palm. You can see the healer is already emitting a lot more light. Then I turn the detector and put it above the whole healing session, and we record the photons emitted during the healing session. And here you see distinctly 3 peaks. And what was fascinating about this 20-minute healing session was that the healer said, well, the energy is not flowing yet. And then suddenly at this point, where we got this peak in photon emission, the healer said, my guides have arrived, the energy is now flowing. And ditto for these other peaks. So her words communicating that the energy was flowing, she felt it, and experienced a connection with her healing guides, correlated beautifully with our photon count in the experiment. And then we see healer palms at the end. After healing, they're not really diminished, and nor is our patient palms. Sometimes we see a little bit less energy after the energy healing, but not so in this particular case. And so we're really counting very small numbers of photons. These healer palms may be on the order of 50, 60 photons per square inch per second, and the dark cone background is about 24 counts per second. So this is an experiment to count the light of life, count those photons, and we found that every healing session is unique. We studied about 12 healers and 12 patients that we assigned them to. Sometimes we see a burst of light in the beginning, and the rest of the session is quiet. And sometimes we saw a totally quiet session all throughout without measuring any light. And sometimes we saw, as in this session, distinct peaks that correlated with the verbal announcements that the healer said. And so it's amazing to note that they're all very unique, but that's what people experience. They also experience the uniqueness of the presence of the energy healer and the flow of energy. So it's not surprising, but the count of photons actually matches.
Yeah, Beverly, let me say, when I've been worked on by healers, by Reiki healers or energetic healers, I mean, the good ones, their hands, you can feel the heat. I call them hot hands, you know, they just radiate warmth. I mean, very, very noticeable. And then, of course, very pleasurable all over, you know, my body. It just feels the energy. And I've also, on the other hand, I've also had people who spent tens of thousands of dollars and have all kinds of certificates and everything for this training, and they have absolutely dead hands and nothing happens at all. So I've experienced both very powerful healers and people that didn't really seem to have much going on. So
yes, there's quite a wide variety out there, and it's also dependent on the state of health of the healer. I think whether the Oriental calendar says chi is flowing today or not. There are so many variables.
Yeah, I would imagine.
It's not as simple as turning the faucet on and off. And people who think that is so are very naive. It's really a transpersonal experience with many unknowns, the presence of guides, the angelic realm, the divine intervention, and the interaction of the therapeutic partnership of energy healer and patient. So it's quite an unpredictable event, and we have to recognize that in our research. I did another study with a practitioner who decided she'd like to treat her patients outside of the biophoton chamber, and we counted the patients, not just the hands this time, but we counted the head, the forehead, the heart region, and the abdomen, the 3 dantians, or chakras, the 3 major regions, energy regions of the body, both before and immediately after energy therapy. And we also looked at the palms of the hands. And I didn't bring you all that data, but there's the regions that we measured. And we found initially that, and these were quite sick patients, chronically ill, with things from Lyme's disease to chronic fatigue syndrome, some of the tough chronic diseases of our times. First, we found energetically they were quite imbalanced, left-right imbalanced, and the upper part of the body had more energy than the vital organs of heart and abdomen. But following energy healing, these 3 regions, head, heart, and abdomen, seemed to become more balanced in their energetic emission, and that was the net result. So energy healing helped balance energetically the patient's left, right, and through these major energy centers in terms of the biophoton emission. We had some other interesting findings. We often take people who are able to do extraordinary things, tasks with their energy. We had a medical intuitive who was particularly skilled at opening and closing her third eye, this region in the forehead, energetically, and she could read people energetically when it was open and not when it was closed. And in the biophoton chamber, we found that her biophoton emission went up and down by a factor of 3. That's 300% more biophotons when she opened her third eye. And back to normal, like the rest of us, when she closed her third eye. Then we had a gentleman who was connected with the International Academy of Consciousness, whose headquarters are in Portugal, who engaged in a particular type of vibrational state that they teach there called the velo, V-E-L-O. And we found that in the biophoton chamber, his hands and other areas of the body were measured, but most amazingly, the heart region increased by almost 400% more biophotons when he was in the vibrational state. And so these things can't be ignored. These are meaningful results, showing that something more than haphazard changes in energy are going on. It's a very specific thing because his vibrational state is very much involved with bringing in the heart energies, the state of love and embracing patients, etc. So this is a very meaningful result. So just to summarize about biophoton emission, we found that it varies with one's health status. The energy is more balanced when someone is healthy over sick patients. And we found that the emission for most healers and patients showed a slight decline after energy healing. We saw a unique pattern of light emitted over time for each healing session, which was rather unpredictable, again, because it involves so many factors. And we found that the emission of patients immediately changed following the energy therapy from a healer, becoming more balanced. And then we found that some healers and Qigong masters, meditators could display extraordinary abilities to dramatically change their biophoton emission from regions of their bodies at will. And so those were the conclusions from those experiments. And we haven't published these yet. I must tell you, I'm really telling you some of our latest things. But they're very exciting, and we hope to continue this research.
Beverly, have you ever done any work with distance healings? Do you find any correlation there?
I haven't worked so much with distant. Now, when I say, sometimes I work 30 feet from detectors, but across many kilometers or miles, only a couple of experiments, because I'm really interested in looking at the energy, and the results from the distant healing experiments are not as robust in general as being present. The therapeutic partnership between energy healer and patient is, of course, most significant when they're meeting person to person. I do believe that more bandwidth, more energy can flow, and there's a greater bandwidth to that relationship than across distance, just like with the cell phones. You know, we have a tiny bandwidth or across the miles doing this presentation, but when we're present, something more flows. There's something more about being human and being together happens. And so I'm more interested in that therapeutic partnership of being one with than I am in distant healing. And I know others are studying it, and I applaud them because it's much more difficult, I think, to manifest and coordinate distant healing studies. I'd like to move on to the next thing that we've been studying. This is very exciting. This is our latest project at Institute for Frontier Science, still under development. Nothing has been published on this whatsoever. And I'm going to show you this sensor suite, as we call it, that we developed to measure subtle energies, especially associated with spiritual healing and extraordinary states. What do I mean by a sensor suite? It's, first of all, an evolving real-time detection system where we have a bunch of detectors, custom detectors that we built. It's 100% custom designed and built, and modular. So we keep adding detectors. And we're investigating psychoenergetic phenomena and recording simultaneously and 24/7 environmental variables such as temperature, humidity, the Earth's magnetic field, cosmic rays, radioactive emissions from alpha, beta, gamma, and negative and positive ions. And we're recording physiological variables from our subjects, such as heart rate variability and galvanic skin response from the fingers and wrists. And we've developed some putative subtle energy detectors. So we're looking to see whether during the act of healing or other extraordinary states, can we record changes in these detectors? And all of this is recorded. So we have some maybe 20 channel recording of what's happening during these sessions. And we usually run periods of control when subjects aren't there, and then we bring them in and another period of control before they actually try to do anything. And then during the act of healing or trying other spiritual rituals, we find interesting changes, as I'll discuss. But here's this week in action with one of our star healers. And you see it's quite a lot of equipment. And there we have all of those detectors, environmental, and he's hooked up, his fingertips are hooked to various devices, and he's emitting energy, and we're recording all of this in real time. And then we're looking to see what other detectors, was there a cosmic ray shower at that time, or a temperature change? And I must tell you that all of our subtle energy detectors are completely shielded in ways that conventional science would not anticipate then any interaction from the environment or persons. So they're in Faraday cages that block electromagnetism. They're under mu metal, which blocks magnetic fields, and they're shielded from ambient light. They're temperature shielded, and we have thermistors on everything in case the hands are suddenly heating up things. We don't find conventional energy changes, but we do register changes on these detectors. But energy healers act to emit energy and engage in these extraordinary states of love and compassion, which they do, along with the energy of emission. So that's an example of our latest studies. And what we found are anomalous changes in behavior of the subtle detectors that correlate with changes in the healer physiology. And, you know, there are known things about the emission of energy from energy healers. They usually make galvanic skin response goes up, for example, and we can see those jumps when energy emission is happening. And sure enough, then our subtle energy detectors are showing anomalous changes. And yet, as I said, these detectors are physically shielded and should show absolutely no effects from persons or the environment, according to conventional science. So we have made a fundamental discovery that merits further investigation, and we need further funding to bring this forward. And I anticipate that we'll have some products to spin off as well that will help people understand more about these states and the energies that they emit that will be a result of this research. But it's still in the developmental stage, and we're really looking now for further funding. So any of your listeners out there, please contact us. It's exciting work, and it's really, I think, going to change our thinking about the full human potential. The last thing I'd like to discuss is a device brought to us from Russia called the BioWell, and that's a registered trademark. This is a commercial device. You can buy it. As a matter of fact, I'm also a distributor of it. And what it is a form of digital Kirlian photography. You may be familiar with that. It's something that was invented in Russia in 1948 by Dr. Kirlian. And in the old days, you put your hand on a photographic plate that was charged under different states of consciousness or energy, and lo and behold, a pattern of energy, a corona discharge would appear on the fingers or hands, which is an induced light emission. But the digital form of this device was invented by a contemporary, Dr. Konstantin Kurakov of St. Petersburg. And it's a small device that runs on USB power from your computer with very user-friendly software. And it looks like this. It's really a white cube about 5 inches on the side with a port there with a black hood over it where you insert one fingertip at a time, and you're touching a charged plate, so there's no film involved. And then for a moment, the researcher presses a button on the computer and the device puts out some 5,000 volts at a very low amperage, so you don't feel anything. But a Kirlian corona discharge from each fingertip is then registered with on the computer desktop, and then there's an amazing software analysis that goes on to elucidate something about that person's biofield at that very moment. Here's another view of the biowell, and this is an add-on. It's an accessory called the Sputnik, which is very interesting. It's a Tesla-type antenna. That is, it looks like a little silver sphere, and then it has spikes all over it. This is a Tesla-type antenna to pick up energy from the environment, from the atmosphere, as Tesla did, of course, relative to the ground. And Tesla was going to give the world free energy in his time, but it was stopped by his bankers, unfortunately. But energy of life is also related to this phenomena. And with this type of setup, I've picked up the ambient energy, for example, of a group of people meditating and trying to achieve a coherence in the state of the group. And so what we find with the Sputnik attached here is that the energy of the group, first of all, oscillates wildly with the Sputnik, and then as the group settles down and begins to become more coherent, it smooths out. And at the end of their meditation session, when they say they have achieved coherent mind, the Sputnik device shows a very quiet waveform. So it's very interesting. It's able to measure energy of the environment. We measured the effect of positive, uplifting spiritual jokes and rather negative, derogatory jokes on a group of people also. And you can see the energy go up and down for the collective group with such an add-on. Very exciting. Here's what the biowell can show from an individual. We take the corona discharge of all 10 fingers, and I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. And the biowell software then yields a composite picture of the biofield. So we see the left-hand view and the central view and the right-hand view and all the way around how the biofield looks. And it's not just pretty pictures, though. Then there's a deep software analysis that talks about the energy distribution, the stress level, and as I'll show you in subsequent slides. So let me show you how the biowell works, just taking a subject, a 26-year-old woman, rather athletic, who came in. And these are fingertip biowell photos. Now this is just from a single fingertip, but we do all 10. And this was her at baseline. So she came in energetically, actually she didn't look so good. You can see that finger is not a perfect circle of light, which would be the ideal image on the left-hand side. And now you see this sector analysis. The computer does this, and it assigns these various segments of the fingertip emission to different organ systems. So segment 1 is the thorax region, deals with the lungs, respiratory system. Segment 2 is the immune system for this particular finger, which is the middle right-hand finger. And on it goes and assigns it. So later on, the software will show you the energy distribution in those organ systems. Then we actually gave her an intervention. This was a scalar device, rather unconventional energy device. I won't discuss the details of it, but you can see much improvement in her energy pattern. And it's believed that scalar devices, which are sometimes used in healing, can produce rapid and significant changes in the human energy field. And following that, then the person goes on to self-heal. That's the idea. If you make positive changes in the biofield, then healing can occur and the physiology and the biochemistry will be regulated. So you can see an improvement because now there's less gaps, it's smoother, less impeded flow of energy. But the right-hand side post-intervention too looks even better. So we gave her another dose of the scalar because one was not enough. And sure enough, we see a perfect circle of light around that finger. That's the ideal that resulted from using this device. So this is her composite biofield from the BioWell data taken from all 10 fingers. So at baseline, you see many gaps in her biofield. And so some organs are not as well balanced energetically as others. And following one session with the scalar device, she's improved. You can see a stronger energy field with less gaps, but after 2 sessions, it's even better. So we can follow the progress of an energy therapy with the BioWell, or with anything, interventions such as meditations or Qigong yoga. In fact, I did a study years ago on yogis and found that people practicing yoga a long time, 2 years or more, consistently on a daily basis, look very good energetically, much like this biofield on the right-hand side, which is, again, a strong energy field without any disruptions. So this software also has the capacity to look at the chakras and whether they're balanced or not, and it shows it by, really it's a left-right balance from the 2 hands. So at baseline, this young woman was relatively unbalanced. You can see the chakras are scattered right and left, and some of them weren't as large. For example, the throat chakra is rather small, as is the solar plexus, and even the root chakra. Following one intervention, she's improved. Things are beginning to become aligned. They're larger, but it's even better after 2 interventions. So you can follow the progress then of an intervention or a series of interventions energetically on patients and clients with this device. And it's very useful both in the clinic as well as in research. Now here's another chart produced by BioWell, which looks at the stress overall, the physical stress of a person, their energy level, the energy balance right-left, and the organ balance. So at a glance, you can see how she moved from baseline, which is the reddish-orange here, more stress, some anxiety, to one session with the scalar device, purple here, it's definitely improved. In the second session, she's back in the normal zone. And energetically, she's grown from, it's still normal, but less energy to progressively more and more energy with sequential doses. Energetic balance, right-left, started at 91%, moved up to 98%, 98.44, and then 98.98 with the sequential doses. And her organ balance, which started relatively low at 80, moved up to 86 after 2 doses. So again, it shows progress. Okay, another screen in the BioWell software shows the energy distribution in the organ systems. And all these are pretty pictures, and maybe you can't read this, it might be small on your screen. It really is a distribution of energy across the various organs and tissues. The left-hand diagram is made by the energy emission from the left hand, and the right-hand diagram is made by the energy emission of the right hand. And there are 3 curves here. The orange curve was the baseline, the purple curve was post 1 intervention, and the green line is post 2 interventions. And basically the energy is getting further smoothed out. And ideally it would be a perfect circle, but nobody shows up like that because we all have a unique energy fingerprint as seen with the BioWell, depending on how we live our lives, whether we are quiet or speak a lot, for example, and will be in the throat area or not, and whether we've just eaten a meal, maybe energy in the colon or not. So it's exciting to see how the biofield maintains its fingerprint for an individual, but shifts as we introduce variables like interventions, or they participate in meditation and other exercises. So here's another view from the BioWell software of overall energy and chakra alignment, looking at the left-hand side here, the first 3 figures. And again, green was following 2 interventions, is definitely an improvement, a rise in energy. On the left, a rise in energy in the front of the body, and on the right-hand side. And chakra alignment also went up dramatically following the 2 interventions. So that concludes my PowerPoint. And I'm accessible by email at brubik@earthlink.net. My website is shown here. Right now it's down, but we will get it up after renovating it. And I'm also an international distributor of the BioWell products. If anyone is interested, they're coming out with more and more accessories. For example, a water sensor was just introduced, which enables us to look at the energy status of different waters. And that will be very exciting to look at water, because I think water probably holds energy more than any other material, holds this subtle energy. Water is, of course, the essence of life, so that's not any surprise. It's 70% or more of our bodies. And so we're very excited to continue to pursue both experiments and clinical work with BioWell products. And those are the websites, bio-well.com and bio-well.eu, European Union.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. There's well, one thing that I just find remarkable, you're actually measuring this stuff in a way that that is scientific and we can look at it. You know, I mean, I've experienced this stuff for years, and Eric Thompson and Javi have both been instrumental in using subtle energies as a part of our meditation tools, and I have just felt it. You know, phenomenologically felt it in my own process, and the power of it. And of course, in being, you know, a sometimes energetic healer myself, when called on to do that, I've felt the, you know, coming through me in that process and seeing the objective results. But being able to just see how you've measured the energy going from the hands of the healers into the healee, if you will, the patient, is extraordinary. Javi, did you have any comments or questions?
No, I just I so much liked seeing all that, you know, because for example, when we interviewed Judith the other day, she was showing a very similar approach, but rather than with energy, with brainwaves, which are, you know, a lot more understood nowadays. And this, I just wonder, do you find that all this still gets received as fringe science rather than proper science?
Well, I think things are changing dramatically. As I said, first of all, society worldwide has moved on and is embracing energy healing. People are running to alternative medicine practitioners, certainly in the United States, at a rate even higher than conventional practitioners. Those are studies that were done even 10 years ago. So it seems to me that society has embraced these things. Science is still behind in embracing it. We're beginning to ask, you know, and develop a mind-body science. That's now a legitimate field. I teach, for example, at Saybrook University in San Francisco, mind-body medicine in a master's and doctoral program, and also at California Institute of Integral Studies in integrative health, where energy medicine and these findings are a definite part of education, higher education. So I would say there are changes. Now, I'm teaching at non-mainstream, non-traditional universities. There's also Energy Medicine University, Distant Learning University from Sausalito, California. I think the change is slower at the conventional universities, and it's still very difficult to find grants from conventional sources to pursue this research. But there are other grants from individuals, from certain organizations that people can pursue. And clinically, people are quite excited about being able to document effects of their patient clients using tools like this. So I would say things are changing. It's nice to see the change across my lifetime, but it's, as Max Planck said, science advances funeral by funeral. So I think we need a new generation of young scientists to move in, and I'm sure that this will be part of the science of the future.
I wanted to ask you as well about water and intention. Is water as permeable to intention as, you know, the work of Masaru Emoto, which is the most famous probably, or what do you know about that? Can you share a bit about that, please?
Well, the work of Emoto, although in all respects was not done with the highest scientific rigor, but nonetheless, I think the results hold true, even though in his case it might have been what we call cherry picking. That means picking the most beautiful crystal to match the intent of love. I've done experiments in even workshops with groups where we use another version of the BioWell. It's a device called the Gas Discharge Visualization Camera, also known as GDV. And this
Sure.
camera, also from Konstantin Karakov in Russia, has the capacity to study materials very profoundly, such as suspended droplets of water. So in these experiments, we have a group of people and they intend different effects for the water. Let's say water at its highest potential is one thing, and then they want love imbued in water, and on and on. The final experiment we always do is changing water into wine. And then they taste these waters, and they find a difference in the taste, and we find differences energetically in the water that are measured with the BioWell right then and there. We're not cherry picking, we're just looking at the energy patterns from the suspended droplet of water with the GDV. And we find greater, more complex energy patterns when people imbue water with love, or when they try to change water into wine with intention. And they can taste the differences. And it was blinded. My tasting, letting them the tasting of the water was blinded for the subjects. And they said, yes, we don't know, but this water tastes different from this. And they didn't realize what had occurred earlier to those waters. So there's no question that water can store intention and can be changed energetically. I have seen it, and many people experience this, and this is the origin of the blessing of water. We put our hands around our food and our water, and we bless it. And that's a very good thing, to realize that this is going to become part of our bodies. Why shouldn't we bless that which is going into us? So,
and in the Catholic tradition, we have the tradition of holy water. You know,
and holy water used to baptize and bless ourselves. Exactly.
Wow.
No, what about highly ordered materials or crystals? Do they also store intention? Are they also?
I think so. I think so. And, you know, people have used crystals of all kinds. There are also special relationships of certain crystals around the human body. Quartz is one, and of course there's a lot of use of quartz and amethyst and relatives of quartz in healing. Another special mineral, I think, that holds intent and energy is tourmaline, and it comes in many colors, and it may be even more powerful than quartz from some data that I've seen.
Now, is this pretty congruent with Chinese medicine? I mean, it seems they've been, as a part of their healing paradigm, they've been dealing with this stuff for millennia. And
in fact, we find certain principles of Chinese medicine. For example, the left hand is yin and the right hand is yang. And the left hand is a better receiver of energy. The right hand is a greater emitter. We found this to be so in the biophoton experiments. Mm-hmm. For example, more photons are coming out of the right hand than the left. And healers often say, you know, I use both hands, but maybe I'm sensing with this hand and sending with this hand. And that's right out of Chinese medicine. It doesn't matter if you're right or left-handed. This yin and yang principle is there. And of course, the main principle of Oriental medicine is where qi goes, blood flows. And so when qi is flowing from healers' hands, more blood is flowing, and then even more qi flows. It seems to be self-propagating. And we find that, you know, more energy is coming out of healers as they get revved up.
Yeah, when I was in the military, I went to Defense Language Institute, and that language teacher, like over 40 different languages, and it seems they had the wives of the husband. Even some of the teachers were these martial art experts from all over the Orient. And so I got to study with a couple of these masters, one from Vietnam and the other that was trained by somebody from China. And they used to do things like that when they'd block you, they would just touch you, soft touch it, and it would be like a cattle prod or something, blast your arm. Or they could take us down in football stances, big, strong soldiers and Marines, and just do this subtle thing. And we'd go back 20, 25 feet. And you just feel this energetic thing. And we're not big, powerful, muscular people. And, and they touch you here, and next day you'd get a bruise on the other side of the arm from where they touch. I mean, just crazy stuff like going.
Well, we have measured, and we've seen and documented things like that. There was a Qigong master who had a shaved head, and he took a slab of metal. It was about half an inch thick, and we all examined it. And then he engaged in a meditative state, an inner Qigong. Then he took the slab of metal and pounded himself on the head with it, right on the crown. And we thought, oh my God. The metal shattered. It was incredible. We watched that metal shatter into fragments, and yet this man had no mark on his shaved head, not even redness. He said he broke it with his chi field, not his head.
I had one of these masters put a hunting arrow. I don't know if you've seen the kind of thing they hunt deer with, these razor sharp pointed hunting arrows right out of a sports store, and put it in his neck there and try to press it as hard as I could. And it wouldn't give, and there was no mark.
Yes,
Like,
I have seen
I'm right
that.
there. I'm just like experiencing this, just like that. Well, the universe is definitely wired in ways that
Well,
I have no idea about.
and here's another one we saw, and this one was presented at a meeting of a physiological scientific society, where Mr. Kawakama, he doesn't mind me using his name, a Japanese yogi and master, was wired up physiologically so we could study his fundamentals. And then skewers, knives, were put through his tongue. There was no bleeding. The tongue was undamaged. There was not a flinch physiologically of his brainwaves, heart, etc. And later we examined his tongue. We certainly expected some wound. There was no wound. I said, how do you do it? He said, I visualized the knife going between the cells. And indeed, there's no injury.
Wow.
So
Yeah, and
miraculous. But the miraculous is within our capacity. This is the power of our mind in conjunction with our emotions and our spirit to work wonders in the world.
and the power of subtle energetic fields. I mean, we've all experienced that. Some places are just feel like they're very holy and very healing and very beautiful, and other places feel awful. And usually it's our hospitals, for one of the places that just feels really bad. And wouldn't it be, I mean, not to take anything away from what medicine has accomplished, but, well, in the northeast of our country, there pharmaceuticals that have been handed out like popcorn has led to a plague of new heroin addicts and opioid addicts. And it's just, you just hit limitations and you start becoming the problem instead of part of the solution, unless you begin to understand at this deeper level, I would think. And the fact that you're doing this in a way that becomes tangible, because I've been very influenced by this my whole life, but to actually see kind of it's nice to see the objective scientific validation in a Western sense, just to satisfy my Western head that's been rather perplexed by all these phenomena for years.
Yes, I would say the average person needs to move beyond the idea that they're just a bag of bar molecules and something that you need to drag to the physician to be fixed up, like bringing your car to an auto mechanic, and realize the divine instrument that we are, the mind, body, spirit, and its enormous potential. We need to unleash that potential. We need to empower people to unleash that potential. And I think that's what the spiritual technologies are facilitating. Yeah. That's why they're so very exciting.
Certainly is, and especially at a time when we need it the most. These things are starting to come online in a very powerful way. And maybe it was through some of our craziness in the 60s where we deconstructed everything that was and began to put it together in new ways that were more inclusive of just our Western way of looking at things. We opened some doors for us to be more receptive to this kind of data and information. But anyway, it's really, thank you so much. This has been really extraordinary. And you have anything else you'd like to, I've got everybody here, or people who are listening in the future, you'd like to share?
Well, I think it's important that we watch very carefully the field of transhumanism. It's something that concerns me. On the one hand, people are adding wearable detectors and other technology to the body, not always with the highest sense of facilitating the human potential, but thinking about becoming robots as some higher form. And I must say, I strongly disagree with this. So while I support and am quite excited about spiritual technologies, I would like to say that's something distinctly different from a robotic version of ourselves. And that we must draw the distinction as researchers, clinicians, and experts in this field to steer society toward full flowering of the human potential of our spirituality and mind-body connection and our energetic potential, and not fall down to this level of worshiping the robotic.
Or just reducing humans to mere intellectual algorithms and thinking, like saying that's, if you have a machine that can think like a human or better than a human, somehow you have a superhuman. You don't, because we're so much more than that. And we're just, anyway, it's very associated.
I disagree with some people, Kurzweil, who's pushing for, consciousness in a machine. I don't think it's so. Not at the level of the human being, which is a divine instrument. The instruments that we make can never be as powerful as us. And we must accept that fact and learn to operate this instrument fully. I think we've got a lot of learning to do, but we shouldn't jump into forfeiting our potential for some machine version. That would be a big mistake.
Yeah, and Ken Wilbur was talking about that the other day when we were talking, and he said one of the things that human beings bring into manifestation are all the life forms that came before us, all our evolutionary ancestors. They all had their own sentience, their own consciousness, and we are kind of this conglomeration of all that, plus that we are more than the sum of our parts, but we hold all that, and there's simply no way to put that into a computer or a machine. There's just so much more, and how it could be very, very dangerous if we go in that direction. And as sure as human beings will do anything, people are going to try to do that. So
well, let's consider the devices like a crutch, a learning tool, but then we throw aside the crutch and we arrive.
Yeah. Beverly, thank you so much, and I really appreciate it. And of course, your contact information is there, and hopefully a whole bunch of people are going to see this around the world, and we're going to just nudge this understanding just a little more for more people.
Well, I'm so grateful for your exciting opportunity to be here with you and the world.
Thank you.
Blessings.
Thank you so much. Thanks.